I want to start with a question that I believe everybody here has to answer. What is the financial matrix? And so the first thing is to identify where you are. So I'm going to draw out the financial matrix tonight. So here's how it looks. The financial matrix is a 2x2 matrix. And you've got offense. What are you doing for financial offense? And you have defense. What are you doing for financial defense? If you're playing defense, so you would say, yes, I am playing defense. No, I am not playing defense. You say offense. No, I'm not on offense. Yes, I am on offense. Now let's break this down. So if you say defense, never heard of it. If I have any money, I'm going to spend it. Not only am I going to spend the money I have, but I'm going to spend money I don't have. It's like you're a magician or something. You actually, if I have $1, I can borrow 5. And that's what people do. And you say, wait a minute, you're only making $100,000 a year and you have $500,000 of debt. About 5 to 1, right? So on that, so if you are not playing defense, now let's even compound it. Offense, barely. And when I say offense, I'm not saying whether you have a job or not. I'm saying what will happen next year that will change. If you're making $50,000 and next year you're slotted to make a 2 or 3% raise, which is the average raise, then you're like, I'm going to make $52,000 next year. So your real offense potential is $2,000 increase. Isn't it amazing that people spend 40, 50 hours a week and their scheduled gain for the year is a couple $1,000s? And so if you have no offense, no defense, I'm going to give you one more factor. I'm going to add ownership and choices. Every one of these is going to give you, do you have ownership or do you have choices? And the goal, obviously, is to have both ownership and choices. So if you don't have any defense, you don't have any offense, you are a financial slave. Now that may sound like a real tough word, a slave, but let's go back and think about what the definition of a slave was. A slave, whether in America, in the South, there was slavery. Terrible. But you know, slavery goes way back further than that. You can track slavery all the way back to the ancient Egyptians. And slavery is a system where you don't own yourself. Not only do you not own anything, but you yourself are owned by somebody else. So if you were looked at a slave, would you say that they have ownership? No. Do they have any choices? No. Now let's look at a financial slave. A financial slave owes more than he's worth. So does he truly own his house if you've made a 5% down payment on a $100,000 house and you're making payments? If you think that you own your house but you have $100,000, just don't pay your mortgage for a while and see if you still own it. Or see if someone comes knocking that's the real owner and tells you to move out. If you think you own your car but you're making payments on it, just stop paying for a while and find out if you truly own. You figure out that, man, I don't own as much as I thought I owned. In fact, I would say not only do you not own it, but the bank counts you an asset. They own you. They own a part of your productive capacity because you've got to pay that or they come take back the thing that you thought you owned. What happens is a financial slave is in the worst of both worlds. He has no ownership and he has no choices. These are the people that go to jobs that they cannot stand anymore. But they go week after, you'll hear them that a Friday afternoon, you can just go to any local watering hole. But you don't even have to wait till Friday. You can go to any local coffee place any day of the week or right where you work. You go and you'll hear things like, oh, I don't like this. And they complain, but they don't have any ability to change it because they don't have ownership and they have no choices. So you say, oh, well, Orrin, I'm not one of those. You don't understand. I'm making 100, 200, someone say 300,000. I don't care. Name the number. Whatever that figure you tell me, and if you tell me, yeah, but I still have a mortgage, I still have leases or car payments or other debts of any type, then I'd say, here's what you did. You are not a slave, but you've moved over to what we call the subject. You're in financial subjugation. Now, it's a little bit different, but Orrin, no, I do have choices. I do take good vacations, so I'm going to give you a plus C. You've got choices, but you have no ownership. So you have no ownership and choices. And you know what? You only have those choices so long as you can continue to perform. If you're a doctor making $300,000 and you're, oh, but I'm a surgical doctor, I can do this. As soon as your hands start doing this, all of a sudden you've lost those choices. But guess what? You haven't lost your debt. You see, you put yourself in a position where you're one tug of the bobber away from a catastrophe. You go back to 2008, the great financial crisis, so many people that were $250,000, $350,000 a year lost their house, lost everything because they lost their job, and they had all of this debt that they'd accumulated that they could only service so long as they had their job, so long as they had their business. I had the builder of the year in Florida, 5 years later, declared bankruptcy. Happens all the time because you're a subject. You're still dependent upon someone else. You're not truly free. You have choices, and it gives the illusion of freedom, but your choices are based upon the debt that you've accumulated, which is someone else's asset. Now, some of you, the reason why so many people have a hard time getting debt-free, because here's how most people think about debt freedom. They're like, well, Orrin, if I didn't run up any debt, it'd be boring. Why'd I have to drive rusted out cars? I'd take boring vacations. I wouldn't be able to go to exotic places. I mean, I've studied a lot of literature on debt reduction, and the worst of them teach stuff like this. Buy 2-ply toilet paper. Because you can tear it in half and just use one side. I'm like, I believe in debt freedom, but I do not believe in that. You got to draw the line somewhere. So long as you're not financing your toilet paper, use both sides. Especially if you're going to shake my hand later. Too much information. Okay, all right. We'll move on. So what if you know, so let's say that over time you kind of figured out the game. You've said, wait a minute. That bank wants me. And all these ads are saying same as cash because they want me to dream. But they're using my dream against me. They're spinning this dream for me, but then they're putting me into debt so that they can draw off my productive capacity and turn me into a slave or a subject. I declare my freedom from that, and I'm not going to get the newest car next year and put it out. I'm going to save up some money, and maybe I'll have to drive a lesser car for a year or two. And it's delayed gratification. It's a short-term denial of what you want. And it's very tough to do that today because it's so taught against that. If you want it, you deserve it. I mean, how many times have you heard someone show you something and say, well, you know, I've worked hard, I just felt I deserved it. Do you want to know how you can tell if you deserve something? If you have the cash, you deserved it. No cash, you don't deserve it. Slow down, Woodward. And so what happens is somebody who's playing defense, they can actually start to build some ownership. Maybe it's not the fanciest car yet, but they own a car. Maybe it's not the fanciest house, but over a period of time, they start to own a portion and eventually the whole house. So they're building ownership. That is a key part of success, is to build assets, ownership. Beyond Financial Freedom, a new book that will be coming out shortly, Chris and I discussed that concept of building ownership, building assets, which is so important. But most people, because they're not on offense, see, so they know how to play defense, but they haven't learned how to increase their income to go on offense. In order to build ownership, you know what they sacrifice? Their choices. Oh, you want to go on that vacation? Not this century. Hey, do you want to drive a new car? And they look at their balance, their budget. Nope, I can't afford that. And they literally start to live a I can't afford lifestyle. And while it's noble, and I respect it greatly, that you're attempting to live within your means, there is another way. Most people, when they hear you talk about debt reduction, they're thinking about the serf position. A serf's a little better than a slave. Think about a serf back in the Middle Ages. They were no longer owned, but the landlord, the lord of the land, he owned all the land, and they were kind of trapped on the land. They didn't have choices. If they ran away, they would get taken back. And so they were stuck on the land, and they were serf. And I'm suggesting you develop a plan to move to become a financial sovereign. Sovereign, what does that mean? Well, the kings, they were the sovereign of the land. God is sovereign over his world. What is a sovereign? A sovereign is someone who has ownership and choices. Imagine being in a position. Now, you take a look at these 4 spots on the board. Are you playing defense? Are you playing offense? And the position where you say, can you imagine being able to go and pick any house you want, practically any house in America or Canada, and select it, and go and pay cash for that house?